Hello, my name is Sean Briscoe, and in this presentation I will be discussing the logistics of judging, or the process that you should go through as a judge. As the program director for the St. Louis Urban Debate League, I will primarily be talking about our events and specifically the process for judging a policy debate round. That being said, most of the information in this presentation will apply to just about any tournament and just about any event within the world of forensics, whether it be interpretation of literature, extemporaneous speaking, Lincoln Douglas debate, policy debate, you name it. Specifically, I will talk about four things. What you should do when you arrive at the tournament location, or the school where the tournament is being held. Then I'll look at a single debate round or a single round of competition and what the process you should go through for that round. And then after the round is over and you're moving on to the next thing, some of the things that you should be aware of. And then finally, the very last slide in the presentation, we'll just talk about what can go wrong at a tournament and how you can deal with some of those issues. So as far as arriving at a tournament location, there are two important locations for you to find. Typically within the St. Louis Urban Debate League, our first round on a Saturday morning starts at 9 a.m. and so we ask that you arrive at 8:45. If you're anything like me, that probably means you're going to show up at 8:30. But to be honest, if you come and find tournament personnel at 8:30 or half an hour before the start of the round, we just are not going to be ready for you. So there's not really any point in you checking in quite yet. So what I suggest that you do when you show up at that location is first and foremost, find the ballot table, also known as the judges table. That's where you will go to pick up the ballot, to find out the room that you've been assigned to, and so forth. Find out where that location is, just so you know where to find it when it's time to go there. The second location that you should find is the Judges Lounge or the Hospitality Lounge. Almost every tournament in the country will have a hospitality lounge, a place where judges, coaches, and so forth can go and relax, get away from the chaos of the tournament, maybe get a little bit of relaxation away from the students. You can talk to other judges, talk to coaches, fill out a ballot perhaps, and grab a bite to eat, get a drink, whatever. You can hang out in there and get away from it at all. So if you've arrived at the tournament 30 minutes before the first round, you can actually go to the hospitality lounge, talk to other people, and wait until it's time to check in, which we usually ask that you check in at the ballot table 15 minutes before the start of the round. So again, if the first round that you've signed up for is scheduled to begin at 9 a.m., then check in at the ballot table at about 8:45. If you're at a St. Louis Urban Debate League event, we will have ballots printed with your name on it, and so you just have to look for your name, pick up the ballot, and you can go on your way, because that ballot not only will have your name, it will identify the competitors that you're judging and the room number in which you'll be judging that round of competition. At other tournaments, you may need to tell the person sitting at the ballot table who you are, and then they'll look up where you're supposed to go and hand you your ballots. Typically, the judges table or the ballot table also has materials that you can examine that will describe the events that you're judging, have sample ballots and those types of things. You're more than welcome to pick up those materials at any time and review them, whether it be back in the hospitality lounge or in the classroom that you've been assigned to judge in that 15-minute window or so. You can also ask questions of the people who are sitting at the table. If there's anything that you're confused about, if you're unsure about, you can always ask us questions, and we're happy to talk to you about it. So, the immediate round itself. It's 9 o'clock, or about 15 minutes before that. What do I need to do? We'll look at this in 3 stages. What you need to do before the round starts, during the round of competition, and then in the immediate time following the round. So again, before the round starts, about 15 minutes, go to the ballot table, collect your ballot, find out your room number, and then travel along to that room. When you show up at the round, or in the room where the round will be held, typically the competitors are already going to be there. Smile, be friendly, talk to the students, help everyone feel at ease, including yourself, by just engaging in chit-chat with the folks who are in that room. We really are a community in the world of forensics and the world of debate, and so it's good, or we like to get to know folks and find out who they are, what they're doing there, and that sort of thing. The students will also learn about you as well if you engage in that chit-chat. One of the tenets of debate, really, or any sort of persuasive speaking, is adapting to your audience, or that you need to know how to adapt to your audience. That chit-chat before the round starts will tell the students a little bit about you. Because the way that they would communicate to a parent who's never seen a debate round is very different than how they would communicate to me, someone who's in my 25th year of involvement with this activity. So just having a conversation with the students, and in the course of that conversation, when they find out that you're judging at the tournament because you're the mom of Susie, who goes to the school where the tournament's being held, or you're an English teacher in the school where the tournament is being held, that will tell the students something about you so that they can communicate specifically to you. That's good for them because it's more likely that they'll actually win the debate round. It's also good for you because you'll have a more enjoyable experience as the students adapt to you. If you have any questions about the event, feel free to ask the students. They've got answers. At least assuming they've been around for a while, the junior varsity debaters, the second, third, fourth year, they'll have answers. If you're not sure what event you're judging, or if you're in the right room, where you should sit in the room, feel free to ask questions like that of the students. The next step before the round starts is preparing yourself to listen. And there's really two aspects of that. The first is disconnecting yourself from the outside world. As a judge, we want you to pay attention to the students. And this is true whether it's humorous interpretation of literature or policy debate. We want you to pay attention to the students. So disconnect yourself. Turn off your phone. Don't check email. Don't check Facebook. You want to disconnect yourself from the world so that you can actually give the students your undivided attention. Now, I'll be honest. When I go to tournaments, it's rare that I actually turn off my cell phone. I put it on silent. And there's two reasons for that. First, I have 2 young children, and I never know when something's going to come up. And second, I'm also a coach, and I may have 10, 15, 20, 30 students that I've taken to an event possibly thousands of miles away from where we actually live. And I never know when those students are going to need to get a hold of me. So it's easy enough with a smartphone for me to put it on silent, set it on the edge of the desk. If something comes up, if I get a text, my screen will light up. That will let me know that something has happened. What I do, though, is refrain from checking my phone immediately when that text comes through. I don't, or at least as long as we're in the middle of a speech, I don't do that. I wait until the speech is over, then it's easy enough to pick up my phone, take a look at it, and see if it's an emergency, or see if it was just random chatter going through the Ethernet. Ultimately, though, what we ask is that you do disconnect yourself so that you're not looking at messages and finding out what's going on in the rest of the world when you're supposed to be paying attention to the students. The second part of preparing yourself to listen is preparing yourself to take notes. If you were at a business meeting or you were attending a class and sitting in on a lecture, you'd have pen and paper, you would take notes. We expect that you do the same thing when you're at a tournament. The best way for you to ensure that you're listening, actively paying attention to what's going on, is to have that pen and paper in front of you so you can jot down important information. Okay, so the round now is ready to begin. The first speaker, the first contestant is up in front of you. Again, the first step for you then during the round, as the speeches progress, as we move throughout the debate, is to pay attention and to take notes. You also want to look for the points of clash in the debate round. Where are the students interacting with one another? Where are they engaging one another? And I don't necessarily mean that they're both like standing up and talking at the same time. What I mean by interaction and engagement is at what points in the debate do you find that they're discussing the same issues, that they're refuting one another? Because this is actually debate. We shouldn't have dueling oratories. We shouldn't have the students on one side of the debate talking about issues A and B, with the other students talking about C and D, and we never bring those ideas together, right? We should have points of interaction, points of engagement, otherwise known as clash. So watch for where that clash occurs, because that's probably where you're going to find out that the debate is actually happening, and that will probably tell you who is winning the debate. One of the things that I think is also important for beginning judges is understanding what specifically cross-examination is. There are speeches in the debate, and there are cross-examination periods. In most formats of debate, those cross-examination periods are not where debates are won or lost. It's not an opportunity for the debaters to argue with one another, to yell at one another, to make winning points, and those types of things. At least in terms of policy debate and Lincoln Douglas debate, that's absolutely true. We use cross-examination as an opportunity to get clarification on things that we misunderstood or that we just plain missed. And when I say we, I actually mean the debaters. You've listened to a speech, and now their opponent is going to stand up and ask for points of clarification. Because you can't debate what you don't understand. So if you missed something or you think you weren't quite clear on what they were arguing, that's when the students are going to ask questions. So you'll notice that during the cross-examination period, whoever just gave the speech is going to answer questions. They should not be asking questions back, and the person who's tasked with asking the questions should not be making their own editorials. They should not be making arguments. They shouldn't say, yeah, but, and have a disagreement. That's not what cross-examination is about. It's about understanding where their opponent is coming from. In addition, well, I guess the important thing then from cross-examination is that we're not really looking at that period as the time when the debate is won or lost. We're looking at it simply as time for clarification. The next thing then is that during the round you should be looking for opportunities to write constructive feedback on the ballot. Let students know what they're doing well so that they can continue doing that, and let them know what they could do better so that they could fix errors and be better in the next tournament. There are natural breaks in the round where you can do that. Students take prep time, and during that prep time, it's downtime for you as well, and so you can be writing comments on the ballot. Me personally, someone with lots of experience, I can do that during cross-examination, because again, remember, cross-examination is not where the debate is won or lost. It's an opportunity to clarify things, and so I've found that I can write constructive comments on the ballot while keeping half an ear open so that I can understand at least where the debaters are. And I'll find sometimes that they're getting clarification on something that I need clarification on, at which point I'll put my pen down and I'll give them my undivided attention during cross-examination as well. Also keep in mind that there shouldn't be any outside influence impacting how you evaluate the debate round. That outside influence comes from two sources, one of which is you. You're judging a debate on issues that you may have a lot of information on, or that you care passionately about, that you have your own political tendencies and political leanings and those types of things. But you should not be sitting there thinking about how much you disagree with the students, or whether or not you think they're right on a particular issue. Okay? A debate is about students debating their opponents. And so you're evaluating who is doing a better job of constructing and deconstructing arguments relative to their opponents. They're not tasked with debating your internal thoughts. Again, keep in mind that debaters are not choosing their own side in most formats of debate. They've been assigned a side to the debate. And so you may be sitting there thinking, that is so off base, how can you possibly believe that? Well, that might not be those students, or that might not be the personal opinions of those students. They might disagree with what they're saying, but they have been tasked to defend a side, and they should be giving an honest effort to defend that position. Okay, so don't get caught up in whether or not you agree or disagree with the statements that they're making. But also, there can be outside influence from observers in the round. It's entirely most tournaments are open to the public. Other people can come in and sit in on the round. And so you may find that the parents of one of the students are there, or the significant other of one of the students, teammates, coaches, any number of different people can come into the round. If they start talking loudly and interfering with your ability to concentrate, interfering with the ability of the debaters to concentrate, you are more than welcome to ask them to please be quiet. Or if it persists, you can even ask them to leave the room. Especially, you should do that if it's interfering with the debaters, or if they're starting to comment loudly on the argumentation that's being made. If they're making comments about how good a set of arguments are, or how not good those arguments are, you don't want to let yourself be swayed by that. You also don't want the contestants to be swayed by what they're hearing from those observers. So again, feel free to ask those observers to quiet down, to be respectful of the contestants and those types of things. Okay, so you've watched the round. Now, as soon as that debate is over, what do you do? Well, you should stop and think about the 2 to 3 most important issues in the debate. Identify the 2 or 3 things that became most relevant, because those are probably the issues that are going to decide or help you to decide who won the debate. So think about the 2 or 3 most important issues and who won them, and then you can decide who the winning and losing teams were. And you can put that down on the ballot. You also need to be able to explain your reason for decision, or the reason why you decided to vote for the affirmative, the reason why you decided to vote for the negative. After you've done that, you identify the winner first, and then you rank order the debaters first, second, third, and fourth. So whoever did the most to contribute to a good debate should be ranked first. Whoever did the least to contribute to a good debate should be ranked fourth. You cannot tie those rankings. It's really important that you identify first, second, third, and fourth. And I guess as long as I'm talking about ties, you also cannot tie the teams. You have to identify a winning team, either the affirmative or the negative, and then rank order the debaters first, second, third, and fourth. Once you've done that, then you assign speaker points. And a speaker points is kind of like giving a percentage grade to the students. You let them know more or less how well they're doing. And so the top ranked speaker, the first place speaker, should have the highest speaker points in the round. The last place speaker, or the person who is ranked fourth, should have the least number of points. You are allowed to tie the speaker points though. Whereas you cannot tie the first, second, third, fourth rankings, you are allowed to tie the speakers. So it's entirely possible that you rank order all 4 speakers, that you assign 28 points to all 4 speakers. And that would send a message to the students that it was a very close round. Okay. It's also important for you to pay attention to the scale. Most tournaments use a 30-point scale. So theoretically, you could assign anywhere from 0 to 30 points. But different tournaments have different functional ranges. Within the St. Louis Urban Debate League, the functional range is 25 to 30 points, with a 27.5 being an average job. So if you have someone who had a lot of good things, but also a lot of things that they could improve upon, that would be a 27.5. If you gave someone a 25, they were woefully unprepared. They were not filling up their speech time, they were making lots of mistakes, they have a lot of room for improvement. If you give them a 30, you're saying, wow, that was a nearly flawless speech, or a flawless speech. I can't really think of anything that I would do to make that better. It's rare for you to give 30s. Another thing that I should point out, if you noticed and were paying attention, I said an average speaker is 27.5 in the St. Louis Urban Debate League. We do allow you to give tenths of a point, although to be totally honest, I'm not sure what the difference between a 27.6 and a 27.7 are, but you are allowed to give tenths of a point if you want to break them down. I also said that the functional range on the St. Louis Urban Debate League is 25 to 30. You will find that other tournaments use different functional ranges. Back in Alaska, for example, where I used to coach, the functional range on ballots is 20 to 30, with a 25 being average. So it's also important for you to check in with the ballot table before the round starts to find out what the functional range is for that tournament or that circuit. And then, again, put constructive feedback down on the ballot. Let the students know what they're doing well and what they could do better. So to illustrate this just a little bit more, the round is over. Clear your mind, you should have some quiet. The debaters are probably packing up their material. You're thinking back on the round. The first question you want to ask is, what were the most significant issues in the round? There are probably going to be 2 or 3 issues that became really important in the round. Once you've identified what those issues were, the follow-up question is, why were they significant? What happened in the debate round to make those issues significant? And finally, who won those issues? If you ask yourself those 3 questions, you should be able to identify the winner and the loser of that particular debate. So what were the most important issues? Why were they important? And who won them? Then you can fill out the ballot. This again is a ballot for the St. Louis Urban Debate League. When you receive that, it's going to be pretty much blank except for your name in the top right corner so that you know that it's your ballot, the room number that you've been assigned to go and judge in, and the round. So in this particular instance, we're looking at round 2 of the tournament. I'm the judge in room E107. You can also see that there are 2 teams, the affirmative and the negative. The affirmative, or the team that was assigned to debate the affirmative, is East High School, Jane Smith and John Smith. And on the negative, Glenn Allen, Catherine Peters, and Mary Tyone were assigned to debate from the negative perspective. You will notice that I have a 2A and a 1A, and a 1 in and a 2 in listed next to the column that's labeled position. It's because the ballot software that we use in the St. Louis Urban Debate League just puts down the names, but the computer doesn't know who the first speaker and the second speaker is. And so you have to ask the students, and then you can just say, okay, John, you're the first, or who's the first speaker for the affirmative? And John will say, I'm John, and same thing for the negative. So the round is over. To go back to the previous slide and think about that. The round is over. I now am going to ask myself, what were the most important issues? Why did those become the important issues, and who won them? When I answer those questions, then I can fill in the first piece of information on the ballot, which is important, and that is the line that says the blank side won the debate representing school, and I filled in negative Glenn Allen Petty. That's the first step. I identify who the winning team is. Why do we have you write both the negative and the school team? Quite simply, it's to help ensure that we don't make a mistake on the ballot. When you return your ballot to the ballot table, they're going to look. And if you've written down the affirmative side won the debate from school Glenn Allen Petty, they're going to go, excuse me, Mr. Briscoe, you said that Glenn Allen won the debate, but you wrote down the affirmative team also. Which team did you intend to vote for? So that's why we have you write down both the side and the code. Now you'll also notice within the St. Louis Urban Debate League, we identify the school that's competing in the round. Many tournaments around the country actually will not let the judges know what school the team represents. They don't want you to know that. So back in Alaska, for example, codes were assigned based on a number and a letter. And so you might have on the affirmative school 21B. And that would tell you that the school is 21, and this is the B team from that school, or probably the second best team from school 21. And so you would just write down then the affirmative side won the debate from school 21B. Okay, so I identify the winner of the round. Then I go in and I rank order the debaters, first, second, third, fourth, and you can see that I identified Mary Tyone, who was the second negative speaker, as the top speaker in the room, the best one. And then John Smith was the second best, and he was the first affirmative, and so forth. Once I've rank ordered the debaters, first, second, third, and fourth, then I fill in my speaker points. And you can look at this and see that I felt that Mary Tyone was nearly perfect. Both of her speeches and her cross-examination, they were excellent, and so I gave her a 29.5. Jane Smith, over on the affirmative as the second affirmative speaker, she was slightly below average, and I gave her a 27. But John Smith and Catherine Peters, although I identified John as being second best in the room, they were very, very close. It was a hard decision for me to identify who was second best in the room, and so I gave them both 28 points, which would be slightly better than average in the St. Louis Urban Debate League. I also, down at the bottom of the ballot, wrote down what my reason for decision was in the round, and then I gave some constructive feedback. And again, like I said, for me, I tend to do that during the downtime the students are taking, and during cross-examination I'm writing down the things that I thought they did well and what they could improve upon. If you need to, after the round is over though, you can put those constructive comments down. Alright, so now I filled out my ballot, the round is over, I filled out the ballot, so for all intents and purposes the round is over. So what do I do now? The first thing I should do is clean up my area. Maybe a pen ran out of ink in the middle of the debate, and so I tossed it on the floor or put it on the desk next to me. I'm going to make sure that maybe I brought in a coffee cup and it's sitting on the floor next to me. I want to make sure that I clean up my area, throw away my garbage. Also ask the students to straighten up as well. We don't necessarily ask after every single round of the tournament that the students put the desks back in order the way they were at the start of the debate or the way that we would expect that maybe the teacher wanted the room, because chances are there's going to be another round of competition in that room. But they can still put the desks in a neat and orderly fashion, pick up their trash and those types of things. If you know that it's the last time that room is being used, then you might even ask the students to put the desks back in what we think that room looked like to begin with. Thank the students for their participation in the round and for their insights. Let them know that you appreciate their efforts. Make them feel like they did a good job. Smile at them, be friendly, help develop that sense of community within the circuit. Then return your ballot. Go back to the ballot table and hand in your ballot. We do want you to wait, though. Don't just toss the ballot down on the table and run off. We would like for you to, if there's a line, wait in line, and then give the ballot to someone who's sitting at the ballot table and give them a chance to look through it. They're going to look through the ballot and see if they notice any mistakes. Remember earlier on the previous slide, I said if you wrote down the affirmative team representing school code and you wrote down the code of the team that was on the negative, the ballot table hopefully will catch that. So give them a chance to check through your ballot. Everyone makes mistakes. We're only human. Like I said, this is my 25th year in the activity, and I make mistakes on ballots every year. When I judge rounds and someone hands it back to me and I feel stupid, I feel like an idiot, but that's okay. I know that I should know better, but mistakes happen. So just give the folks at the ballot table a chance to look through that ballot before you take off. And they'll generally look at it and they'll look through it and they'll go, "Thank you very much, Mr. Briscoe. We appreciate your time. Are you judging another round? And if you are, then you can pick up your next ballot." Before you take off, you might even ask them when the next tournament is. Make sure that your calendar is marked off so that you can come back and see these students growing and progressing and help out again in the future. We'd appreciate it. I guess the other part of that, too, is not just waiting at the ballot table, but I also like to ask that judges don't leave the tournament right away. Before you leave the building, go up to the hospitality lounge. Get some water, get a cup of coffee, get a snack, talk to some other judges and coaches. I understand if you have to run out, that's one thing, but we have multiple levels of checking to make sure that there aren't errors. Hopefully you've checked over your ballot before you turn it in. The ballot table is checking over it at the ballot table, and then that ballot's going to go back to the tab room or the tabulation room where we take down all the information and enter results so that we can see who the best teams in the tournament are. Invariably, mistakes make it all the way into the tab room as well. And so if you go get a cup of coffee, chat with other folks in the hospitality lounge, it gives us a chance to have that additional layer of check so that if we find an error, we can run up to the hospitality lounge and find you and get the ballot corrected so that we don't have to try and track you down after you've left the tournament and hold things up. So if you have the time, please, by all means, stick around for a little bit. Talk to other judges about what you've been seeing and learn from them as well. All right, so now that we've gone through the entire process of arriving at a tournament and judging around and what you do when you return your ballot, some of the things that come up that I think judges should be aware of and be prepared for are things like tournaments run behind schedule. It is not uncommon for tournaments to run 15-20 minutes behind schedule. So try not to get upset with the folks, particularly at the ballot table, because it's probably not the ballot table's fault. Chances are that's another volunteer who's sitting at that table. Maybe it's a student who's been roped into sitting at the ballot table. Taking out on them doesn't do any good, just makes them get flustered. The blame is probably elsewhere. It may even be a cascading series of events that's led to the tournament running behind schedule a little bit. Just try and be aware that things happen. There are a lot of moving parts at a tournament, and many things can go wrong. I do also ask then that as a volunteer judge that you make sure that you have enough time to be able to cover the round that you've been assigned to judge. Most events take about an hour and a half from start to finish. from the time that the round is supposed to begin until the round should be over and the ballot is filled out. Whether you're judging humorous interpretation of literature, extemporaneous speaking, or policy debate, whatever, they take about an hour and a half. That means, as far as I'm concerned, signing up for a round of competition is really committing yourself to about 2 hours of time. 15 minutes prior to the start and about 15 minutes after the round. In addition to that, again, be aware that tournaments can run behind schedule. So if you know that a round is starting at 3 and you have to be somewhere at 5 o'clock, you probably shouldn't sign up for that 3 o'clock round. Have some flexibility on the back end. Okay, you've been assigned a ballot. You know that you're assigned to room E107. You get there and the room is locked. Happens all the time that rooms get locked. So what should you do? Well, go back to the ballot table and let someone from the tournament know that the room is locked. Better yet, if there are students already at that room, send one of them back to the ballot table. One, saves you some time, but two, these students compete on these circuits all the time. They know who belongs at that school, meaning they know who the coaches, or most of the time, a lot of the time, they know who the coaches at that school are, they know who the competitors at that school are, and so when they're running through the halls, they know who to talk to. And so they're a great resource to use to have them go and tell someone associated with the tournament that a room is locked and get someone up with a key to unlock the door. Another thing you should be aware of is almost every single tournament has an odd number or requires an odd number of judges. We do not put an even number of judges into rooms. So if you've been assigned to room E107, you go down there and you find that there's another judge in the room. One of two things has happened. Either one of you is in the wrong location, or you're expecting another judge, that a third judge is going to be joining you. If it's a preliminary round, chances are one of you is in the wrong room, because preliminary rounds we assign one judge to the room, but in elimination rounds, that's when we put in multiple judges, and so you should have 3, possibly even 5 judges in the room. So if you have an even number of judges, check to make sure that you're in the right room, check to make sure that the other judge is in the right room, or wait for another person. If the round was supposed to start and it's been 5-6 minutes, send someone down to the ballot table to see if we know where the third judge is, if they're on their way, if they're trying to find, a lot of times we're trying to find someone, a judge didn't show up, and so we're trying to find a replacement judge and those sorts of things. So just send someone down so that we're aware of the problem, and we can also fill you in to let you know if we know what the problem is and when the round should end up starting. No-shows from students. Every once in a while, a team or a competitor doesn't show up for the round. So what should you do as a judge? Well, give them 5 minutes or so. If they still haven't shown up, it might be that they're just stopping in the bathroom from their previous round. Maybe their last round ran a little bit late or whatever. So give them a few minutes. If we've passed the 5-minute mark, send someone down to the ballot table, just like you would if you had an even number of judges, to alert someone that we're missing a team. And ultimately, most tournaments are going to say, give them 10-15 minutes. If they still haven't shown up, then just write on the ballot, the affirmative was a no-show, or the affirmative forfeited the round, so that we know what happened. Then you can take the ballot down. If you're returning back to the ballot table and you see the students running down the hall, and I'm sorry, I'm late. If it's still within a reasonable amount of time, you can go ahead and start that round. We may, if all other rounds have started and we're now beyond 15 minutes, we may not want to start that round. You can get a guidance from the ballot table on whether or not that round should take place or not. Okay, one of the things that can be a shock to community members who are judging for the first time or even don't judge very often. Every once in a while you'll get a student look at you and say, what's your paradigm? What's your philosophy? What that student is actually asking you is, what is your background in the activity? Do you have any likes or dislikes? What do you think debate should be? And those types of things. I actually counsel my teams not to ask judges for judging paradigms if it looks like you might be a community member. If it looks like you're a volunteer who doesn't have background in the activity, I counsel my teams not to ask the question. But you may very well get asked, what's your paradigm? All they really want to know is, what is your background? Are you judging because your daughter is on the debate team and she asked you to judge? Are you judging because you're a social studies teacher at the school and the coach came and said, hey, I really need a judge at 3:30 this afternoon. Can you judge for us? Let them know that. And then that will tell them that you don't have a lot of background with the activity, and that will help them to communicate effectively to you. What should you do if something offensive happens in the round? Well, that's largely a judgment call on what you think you should do if you think something offensive happened in the round. If someone's using foul language and those sorts of things, that's up to you on how you want to evaluate that and what you do with it. At a minimum, I would say most judges are probably going to write down on the ballot what happened and let the coach know. But sometimes there are other things that happen, like maybe someone is just getting overly aggressive with their opponent. Maybe they're starting to bully them, and those types of things in the round. Hopefully not, because we do want to have a friendly community, but every once in a while it happens. I remember several years ago, I had a team that I was taking from Alaska to the Harvard Invitational Tournament. It was the first time they'd ever traveled outside the state, the first time they ever went to a big tournament, and their opponents were getting pretty aggressive with them, and it was flustering my students. Well, the judge, and they were being pretty snarky with my team, and the judge, who knew the other team and the other team knew them, actually made a snarky comment at them in the middle of the round. And you could see the looks on the debater who was standing up at the time was like, what? Why? Oh. And then they calmed down and they were very polite for the rest of the round. The point of that story, if you feel that things have gotten out of hand, you are more than welcome to say something, to highlight what behavior needs corrected. Usually you don't want to intervene in a debate round. Usually you should not speak. You should not be making comments or disagreeing with the content or what's transpiring in the debate. But if you see something offensive happening, if you see something disrespectful happening, then maybe you do need to intervene, particularly if it looks like one of the teams is being bothered by it, and you would be within your right to do that. What should you do if a student freaks out? By freaking out, I mean, we have novice competitors who are at their very first tournament, and they might be standing up there. You might see their hands shaking and their papers shaking and their voice trembling, and they may stop speaking. They may get flustered. They may decide to sit down at their seat before their speech time is over. Some coaches are going to disagree with me on this statement. Some tournament organizers will disagree with me on this statement. But I think that since this is an educational activity, you can help that student feel at ease. You can let them know that they're doing a good job. Offering words of encouragement, saying, go ahead, just take a few deep breaths, look over your notes, and begin again whenever you're ready. Offering to them, would you like to sit down and talk to your partner for a little bit? I'll leave your speech time running. When you're ready, you can stand back up and speak. Some people will say, hey, that's not fair, because now you're giving them extra time, they can stand up and make better speeches. But you know what? A, it's an educational activity. We want them to learn from the experience. We want them to come back. And B, if they're having that type of trouble in the round, they're probably not going to win the debate anyway. And so giving them the opportunity to learn from this round is what we really want. And so feel free to offer that type of encouragement to get them moving again so that we can have a debate and so that they can learn from it. What should you do when you don't know what to do? Or you're lost and you're confused. I think those two statements go together. Sometimes at the end of the round, you're just confused on what should happen. There are two situations that I can think of that probably are leading to this. One is you're sitting there and you're going, man, the kids on both sides of this debate were really, really good, and I just don't know who to vote for. Chances are the reason why you're confused in that instance is because they were two ships passing in the night. They were doing a really good job presenting their own ideas, but they weren't necessarily engaging in clash during the debate, and that's why you're confused. At that point, then, you have to try and figure out who did do the better job of debating, who made their issues most important in the round, and progress forward. And there's really not much that I can do or other tournament hosts can do to help you figure that out. The second reason why judges sometimes get confused or lost is when students start saying that someone broke a rule, that they weren't allowed to do something, or that they should be punished because they violated a rule. And so you're confused because you don't know if it's a rule or not. Well, there's two types of rules. For me, I say that there is one rule of debate, and that's that there are no rules, meaning that many of the things that we quote-unquote call rules in debate are debatable, and the students are allowed to have debates. So if they're saying you're not allowed to run that case because it's a non-topical case, it falls outside the bounds of the resolution, well, the debaters have to convince you that the case fell outside the topic area, and they also have to convince you, or do a better job of explaining their arguments than their opponents do, as to why a team should lose for running a case that's outside the topic area. It would be akin to, we've invited another team to a football game, but then we bring them out onto the hockey rink, and we've got hockey sticks and hockey pads and pucks, and the other team, they've shown up in football gear. And they could make arguments back and forth on whether or not that should be allowed and whether or not the team who's playing the wrong game should be punished, and those types of things. The other types of rules that get violated are things like that are written specifically into the procedures of the tournament, that maybe this particular tournament has said that novice first-year competitors are only allowed to run one of the following 4 cases, and this novice team has run a different case. That would be a tournament rule violation, which is different and should be dealt with in a different way. Primarily in those instances, you are not the arbitrator of the rule violation, or maybe somebody falsified evidence. That would be another good example of a hard and fast rule that got violated, that a team should be punished. You're not actually the person who should be arbitrating that rule. So the rule of thumb for you is, if students are debating about rules, then they're debating for you, and they're trying to convince you that a rule was violated and that should matter to you on the reason for decision. If they have actually violated an ethical rule or a tournament procedure rule, they're going to take that to their coach, who will bring the issue to the TAB staff or the tournament host's attention so that we can deal with it really behind closed doors. And so if there's debate in the round about whether or not someone was allowed to do something, it's probably an issue about debate specifically. So that's it. That's what it should be like for you when you show up at your tournament to judge, the process you go through in terms of preparing yourself for the round, listening to the round, filling out a ballot, and then dealing with some of the unexpected situations that come up. If you have any questions, please by all means feel free to contact me. My email is on the tournament website, and so you can shoot me an email. You can ask the ballot table questions when you show up at the tournament. You can ask me questions at the tournament, or whoever the tournament host is. If you're not at one of my tournaments, obviously, you probably can't ask me, but whoever the tournament host is, you can always ask them questions. I hope you enjoy your experience at your next tournament, and we look forward to seeing you.